It's Graham Healy, your Senate candidate for Rise Up Australia. Today, I just want to have a bit of a chat, a very quick chat, as I always say, a very quick chat, regarding churches and their support, or so-called support, behind what's going on in Australia today. Now, we've seen a lot of what I call huffing and puffing, and we've seen a lot of, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. Unfortunately, I believe, well, this is what I believe within my heart, that in my inner spirit, basically, this is what the Lord said to me, I believe. The church has to put on army boots. So this year, 2019, the church has to put on army boots, right? So what that means is they've actually got to do something about all these issues. Unfortunately, with the same-sex marriage plebiscite. Now, with the plebiscite, I'll just remind everyone, a plebiscite is not has no reflection on the Constitution of Australia. You have to have a referendum. So plebiscites and all that, that's just a little, it's basically a government poll, and it's not very well explained, especially the same-sex marriage one and a few of the plebiscites they're putting out. We'll do a plebiscite on this and that. If you really want to get the people's opinion, and it has to be very, very qualified, you've got to do a referendum. And I know they carry on about the costs of a referendum, but they don't carry on about all the money they've wasted over the last 30 years, which you'd be able to hold a referendum every 10 seconds, the amount of money that the both sides of government have wasted, basically. Now, regarding the church focus today, the trouble with Australia's church, and also a lot over in the US, is that they're talking about a lot of things, and you've got these groups, and I mean, I've belonged to various, apart from having my own ministry as well, I've belonged to various Pentecostal groups, and what I've found is, yes, we can pray about stuff, and that's right, we do pray about things. But that's where it all stops. It's like there's no action behind anything. So when you look at the scriptures carefully, you'll see that every king had a prophet that was backing him up. Now, what I'm suggesting to the church in Australia is you had better, and maybe this is a word from the Lord, but, well, have a think about it. You had best put army boots on all these prayer items you're praying about, right? So in other words, independent parties such as Rise Up Australia, of which I represent, and Pastor Daniel Noel is the president, and yes, I suppose in a way there is a separation between church and state. There is there, because we all have a democratic right to voice our opinion, and also voice our, let's say, our spiritual stance on issues. So that old caption that will separate church from the government, or church from the workings of the government, I think that's a recipe for disaster, actually, because you're entitled in a democracy to have your own spiritual beliefs. And the other fact is that Western society was founded on Judeo-Christian values, celebrating Christmas and all the rest of it. So, same in the US. I mean, the US as well, you see what Donald Trump's doing. He's actually reinstating what I call conservative Christian values. And, look, I'll just tell you something, folks. The difference between a conservative Christian values and the rest of them, and I'm not just focusing on radical Islam, because there's no choice in radical Islam. Basically, it's a death cult. Death going in, or death if you want to get out. Just like in the news recently, young girl over in Thailand or somewhere, that was had a parents in Saudi Arabia. Now she's going to Canada. She decided that she was going to step out of the fundamental Islam situation, but she couldn't go back to Saudi Arabia because a family would kill her. And, God, hasn't anyone woken up to this yet? In Australia, you've got fundamental Islam here, and you've got, the adherents to fundamental Islam reading the Quran, 150 verses of jihad, as they say, or their holy war. Holy war? What sort of holy war has 150 verses of death to infidels, Jews and Christians, death if you don't go in the cult, and death if you get out of the cult, as highlighted by this young girl who's escaped to Canada. So, that's why, as I've said in a few of these other broadcasts, and I'm not focusing on that at the moment, that is why when there's terrorism acts in Australia or any other part of the world, you'll find that the Islamic community remains very, very silent. Why? Because the book they're reading tells them to do it. That's why. So, in Australia, you've got, I think, Imam Tawhidi, who's the Imam of Peace, but everyone else is against him. He's trying to, I don't know what he's trying to do actually, but he's a good bloke, and he's trying to, let's say, put the law of the land first, not Sharia law. He's got an uphill battle there because people apparently, when he goes on these different rallies and stuff, his own Muslim people spit on him and all this sort of stuff. Oh, my goodness sake. Look, I'm not going to focus on that. What I want to focus on is the Christian church. Now, just in saying, the difference between the Christian religion or the Christian belief system and any of the other ones, be it fundamental Islam, be it Buddhism or any of the other philosophies, I call them, be it, I suppose, like almost communism is, I suppose, is like a religion in China, isn't it? You worship the leader. So the fundamental difference with Christianity is that you have a free will choice. No one forces you to be a Christian. No one forced me to be a Christian. That was a voluntary choice that I had, and that's the big difference. And I mean, there are the other benefits, of course, regarding forgiveness of sin and all that sort of stuff, but no one forces you to be a Christian. And if you decide you don't want to be a Christian, well, there's a negative side of that, but no one's forcing you not to be a Christian either. So in a democracy, that is how actually democracies were formed, through Judeo-Christian guidelines. I.e. the Bible was the guidelines for the Judeo-Christian system, which is what the West operates by, and what Israel operates by. I mean, it's the only democracy in the Middle East, and hasn't everyone figured out that the rest of them are like all they're thinking about is killing Jews, or infidels, or the unbelievers? Killing Jews, infidels, or Christians? That covers most of us in the Western world. In fact, pretty well all of us in the Western world. So there's a mentality there that has to be addressed. You have to speak the truth. Now, getting back to the church, this is the main thrust here. It won't take long today. The church in Australia, and the US for that matter, the church in Australia, the church system, there's a difference between the real church. The real church is all the born-again believers, according to John 3:3, and that's not necessarily in the walls. It can be anywhere. You can be a representative of the church as in Jesus Christ within you, wherever you go. But I'm talking about the church that's the four walls that so-called represents Christ. And many times, in many situations, it does a very bad job at that, because it doesn't preach a gospel that's fundamental. It just preaches a bless me gospel, I call it, or they're running social clubs and that. I won't go down that line, but for those churches who have worked out They've got their Bibles out and they've looked to Revelations and they've looked at the very other indicators of where we are in time and space. They're sort of realising that the world's changing rapidly. And it's not just globalism. The globalism and all that's one thing. But there's a spiritual war going on at the moment. And you're seeing the rise of a very dark force over the world, Europe, Germany, UK, and in the little pockets in Australia, and that is the rise of fundamental Islam. It is a dark force. It's got nothing to do with God, not the real God. It's all to do with taking over the world. I mean, it sounds funny, doesn't it? You know, they want to take over the world, but that's exactly what they want to do. They want to subject you, take you from freedom of speech, freedom of democratic right to make up your own mind with what faith you want to believe in and what you want to think. See, the communists, you know, the communists are sort of like a religion because the Communist Party sets itself up as God. You know, they put Mao Zedong out there in a open coffin or something, and everyone's crying about every day. Oh, you know, he's dead. But they're still worshipping him. So, you know, in these various political systems, there'll be an ideology that moves forward, and the ones that have no free choice or democratic process, true democratic process, they're cults. All of them. So what I'm saying to the church in Australia is simply this. If you want to go down the slippery slope that you're seeing happening in Australia regarding the church having no power at all because they don't want to make any decisions on anything, they don't want to offend anyone, and then they're worried about their funding from the various government groups regarding their status as like a charity and all this sort of stuff. This year, you are going to have to, as this is talking to pastors and leaders, you are going to have to get behind the Christian political independent parties. Rise Up Australia is one of them. Daniel Nyala's the leader of Rise Up Australia. He's a very prophetically gifted man, much prophecy over his life, and that's why I'm associated with him. That's the main reason. And the Lord told him to start a political party. Then, of course, you've got Corey Bernardi, who's also his group. There's a lot of good Christians in that group. And you've also got Bob Catter, who's a Christian as well. So, you know, I'm not talking about what people who call themselves a Christian. I'm talking about people who are really Christians. They're within their own spirit. They're born again. And I'm not saying that from a political perspective we go pushing the Christian agenda. We don't. But the thing is that those values are what we believe in. Rise Up Australia is a Christian democratic party who loves Donald Trump, for a start. That should weed out a few haters, I suppose, and loves Israel. You know, that's what the scriptures tell us to do, and we do. So, bottom line, I'll finish off this message here. Send this message out to church leaders, to church pastors, and if you want myself or Daniel Nyala or any of the group from Rise Up Australia to address some of your people, or better still, what I suggest is that churches, you know, ones that are switched on and actually know what era we're in globally. You know, you've got to be pretty scripturally naive not to realise what's happening in the world today. We are in a pivotal point of global change, and this year and next year in Australia will make or break this country. So if you, I would suggest that some key leaders come along to the Rise Up Australia party meeting on the 23rd of February at the Pig and Whistle in Intrapilling. Or if you want myself to address an audience in your church, I'm quite happy to do that from a Christian political perspective. Won't be a whole lot of drawn-out conversation from me. I'll just get straight to the point. Go onto my website, www.riseupaustraliabrisbane.com, and that actually clicks through to our main website stationed in Melbourne with Daniel Nyala and the team, www.riseupaustralia.com. So there we go. I think that we've got to move from the church in the four walls, the church, the little social club church, the one that's praying. I'm all for praying. I'm all for that. But praying and doing nothing about it, that's faith without works. That's dead in the water. So I suggest this year, and as the Holy Ghost has said to me, the church, the real church, must put on army boots. We have if the churches get together on a political basis and get behind the Christian political independent parties, especially in the Senate, we are going to have a big victory in the Senate this year. And if the churches don't get behind it, we are going to go down the slippery slope. And if the socialists and communist-based political parties such as the Greens and Labor, if they get into power, guess what, church people? You've got yourself to blame. So it's time to put the strap on those army boots and move forward and get behind the people on the front line. Yes, you can pray about it. You can, I've been to so many meetings where they're all praying about it, and I agree with you. I can intercede on stuff. That's true when we seek what the Lord says. But you know what? Better start reading the Bible and see what the actual Lord did in the whole scriptures when he backed up the various kings moving to take territory. And what I'm saying to you, maybe this is a word from the Lord to all you pastors and what have you today, it's time to move the troops out. It's time to get behind the Christians, the Christian conservative parties who have put themselves on the line, on the front line, to make a difference in Australia, because this is the year. If you're not going to do it this year, just keep going on that religious road. You'll never get anywhere, and next minute, all your freedoms, your religious freedoms, will be cut out from underneath you. I guarantee you. If ever on this wide world that the likes of Labor or Greens get into power, you, the church, has big dramas. Of course, we can all say that, yes, we'll hand it over to the Lord. We do that. But you know what? Here's the kicker. Without faith, works are dead. So you've got to act in faith and then put army boots underneath that faith. Get behind the independent Christian political parties. Not only Rise Up Australia, Corey Bernardi's, Conservatives, and the other Conservatives. Bob Katter's a good one as well. He's a Christian guy. So, these are the values that we're all about in a democracy. All the rest, they don't believe in Christian values. They actually don't believe in democracy because the PC police and all these sort of characters, they're all about shutting down your opinion, shutting down critical thinking. Rise Up Australia is not about that. And just go onto our website and see what we're all about. So, okay, that's what the broadcast is today. I'm trying to motivate Christian conservatives to actually do something about it this year, because if you don't, Australia is in big trouble. And if you come down the angle about, the Lord's going to do this and the Lord's going to, well, you know what? The Lord uses you. That's the big thing. Jesus moves through his people. So if someone's sick or something, you can pray about it as much as you like. Eventually, you've got to go and see that person, maybe lay hands on them or whatever, or help them, send them to a Christian doctor, etc., etc. There's actual footsteps behind. There's feet behind praying. Sure, you pray. I'm all for that. But at the end of the day, you've got to do something about it. I suggest you do something about it. Come along to the meeting on the 23rd of February. Pig and Whistle, go onto the website, register for the event. I'm prepared to talk at any church meeting or what have you, and I won't be long with it. I'll just tell you what the bottom line is. But this year is a paradigm change about to happen in Australia. You want to be part of it, or do you want to get left behind? Think about it. Okay, Graham Healy, Rise Up Australia, over and out, speaking to the churches, especially in Brisbane. Okay, have a great day, and God bless you all.